All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Do we have minutes from the meeting before that? Because we didn't have a quorum yet.
That is.
We can do that one.
Oh, right.
We'll have to come back and approve the board minutes.
All right, we're going to have a presentation on 2-year strategic marketing plan. Please.
And perhaps our very energetic marketing team will give a consolidated one, since 66% of our committee present heard it before, but I'm sure they'll have more questions.
However, our
Thoughts?
chair needs to fully understand it.
Exactly.
Go quickly, though.
Our chair kind of got the gist in the
Yeah, I got
Brad's
it.
meeting the other day, so
Okay.
she's heard most of what I'm going to say as well. All right, well, good morning again. Very excited to present to you. We're going to be working on marketing modern transit. So first, I'd like to introduce the team. Almost everybody is sitting in the back there. We have Ashley, who is our media liaison at PIO. Aaron is our videographer. Mia is one of our graphic designers. Lizelle is our other graphic designer, and Alyssa is our digital manager. So she handles all of our digital and social media. So I like to say we're the small but mighty team. We handle things internally, and then we work together with Stacy and Elisa from FKQ Advertising, who are our agency of record. So internally, we build relationships. We build relationships with the earned media, building relationships with reporters so that when we have good stories to tell, it's easy to get out there and get the stories told in the newspapers and on TV. Digital and social media, building relationships with our riders and with business leaders throughout the community that follow us on social media. We're always sharing information there, talking with riders, talking with business people, tagging events and things when other things are going on, like ride the bus down to the Dali Museum, and we'll tag the Dali Museum, and then they can share it out to their friends and followers as well. And then building corporate partnerships, where we are working on building relationships with companies and businesses throughout Pinellas County and finding ways that we can support them with public transit. So the planning team's primary responsibility is listening, learning, and developing. So they are out listening to riders. They're going to town halls, speaking with riders, listening to riders there. They are doing group events. They're doing neighborhood and community events where they are out there listening, finding out what's going on with our riders, what sort of things they need, what kind of services and programs would assist them. And once they've identified an area of need, then they get to work on project development. They'll do even more public engagement at that level. They'll work on developing the program parameters, cost analysis, ridership projections, operational things. And once they have all of that determined, then they kind of hand it to PSTA marketing department as a nice little bubble for us to tell the story. So we take the relationships we've been building and the listening we've been doing, and then we tell our story. Yes, sir.
Suppose in the course of your meetings with the riding public and other groups, you identify perhaps a new or modified route. What's the likelihood, or what's the procedure to actually go through the process of determining if that would be, viable?
That's a really great question. Heather is the planning manager, so she might be able to answer that, or Brad. It's the planning team.
I didn't mean to throw you off your...
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
No, it's the planning team that does that. They handle that public engagement and do that identification of the need, and then kind of go through that whole process.
Okay, yeah, we'll talk about that another time then. Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to throw you off.
Oh, no, that's okay. It's a great question. We can answer that another day. So all of our marketing and communications efforts are very deliberate. We are wanting to stress the innovation and facilitate needs of one of these goals, which is to improve the passenger experience, increase ridership, or increase community support. So everything we do, we're trying to think of at least one of those three things in mind. So when we're going to tell a story about a product or service that PSTA is offering, we identify the target audience. Who are we talking to? What are we going to tell them? How do we explain the product or service in the easiest way possible? And then what are the channels we're going to use to get that message to them? The example here is the TD late shift. So that need was identified for helping late night workers get home from their jobs after bus services added for the evening. So the target for that was very specifically current TD eligible riders. The method was using a palm card, which we then directly handed to those users that were eligible as they picked up their bus passes. So that's just kind of an example of how we kind of walk through those processes in that aspect. Now there's a bigger story here, more than just relationship building and more than just talking about the services we provide. We also want to highlight and promote PSTA's innovative programs, projects, and visions. That's a bigger story than the individual tales about all of these great services that we are providing. Internally in the marketing department, the staff that is seated in the back here, we always work towards creating strong content because we believe good storytelling is the best way to get our message out there. We have high quality printed materials, everything from a bus schedule, which the riders use to map their trips, all the way to the one-pagers that you all are handing out to legislators. We are also creating compelling video. The Next Stop video series is bi-weekly. We've really ramped that up, increased the quality of the visual that we're using, and also increased the quality of the storytelling. And it's evident in the fact that we're getting lots of great views and we're getting lots of engagement. So we're having people like it, share it, and comment about it. We're also doing instructional and promotional videos like this one on the right-hand side that's promoting Direct Connect. We did a Pandora ad, an audio ad, in the month of February to talk about Direct Connect, and we have this video ad that's running on Facebook, and it'll be going on YouTube to promote the services that we have right now. The proactive news media interactions, like I mentioned before, Ashley is always working on developing strong stories that she can bring right to a reporter. Reporters love it when you kind of present them all the facts and have the story all laid out and make it easy for them to then take your information and tell the story. So those are the relationships she's building so that we can have access to these great channels for earned media. Online digital, like I said, we're incorporating digital and social media in everything that we do. We try to push people to the website where they can learn more about the services. We want them to interact with us on social media and digital media. That's how everybody's communicating these days, and we want to definitely capitalize upon that. Our website is going to be launching, new website is going to be launching in May. It's a mobile first design. We know that a majority of our people who are coming to PSTA.net are getting there on a mobile phone or on a tablet. So the design of this website is made to be responsive, so it will adjust to your tablet or your phone automatically. It'll make it a lot easier to find the information that you need, and it'll be a better experience overall.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
What was that little yellow symbol?
That is Snapchat.
Okay.
Snapchat. Alyssa likes to experiment with new platforms. So while we have Facebook, we have Twitter, we have YouTube, everybody's heard of those. When something new comes up, she likes to try it and see what happens with it. We tried Periscope last year. It was kind of fun, but it didn't really go anywhere. So Snapchat is the newest thing, and she's been snapping, is what they call it, snapping sometimes at meetings and events, and she's getting good response from it so far. So we'll kind of see where that one goes. Yeah. The little ghost is kind of, it makes me think of the hamburger.
Yeah.
And then we also have partnering. So there's kind of two layers of partnering here. We look for opportunities to promote public transit at large crowd events. Things like Sugar Sand Festival, where we encourage people to use the trolley to get there. Things like Florida Jazz Holiday, where you can ride the bus. So anytime there's an opportunity to encourage people to ride the bus, we like to partner with the organizations that are planning those things and encourage them to help us cross-promote public transit along with their event. And then we're trying to expand the UPass program out of just the educational realm and move it on into the corporate world so we can get some corporate clients participating in that unlimited access program for their employees. And Mandy is jumping into that and getting really busy making good contacts. So all of that said, these are all the things we're doing every day. We're talking about the bigger story. We're talking about the innovation. We're talking about Direct Connect and Flamingo, and we're marketing all of these things all of the time. But there's also a bigger story that we want to tell. PSTA right now is defining what is innovative modern transit in the transit industry. Brad gets calls every week at least. It was every day for a while from transit agencies all around the country wanting more information about Direct Connect. How do we do these Uber partnerships? How is it working? How are people receiving it? Are we getting ridership? How does it all work? So that's an innovation that people know about in the transit industry, and we really want to bring that information back home so we can tell the people here in Pinellas County about all of these great innovations. So we have a responsibility to tell them about these innovations, And we have this bigger story that will integrate into our everyday activities. And with that, I would like to introduce Stacy and Elisa from FKQ Advertising. You all may remember them. Well, you all from an hour ago. From last year when they joined us as our ad agency. And they are going to be helping us with this bigger message storytelling piece.
Thank you.
Did I hand you the one first?
That's okay. Thank you, and good morning, new people. So as Cindy had set up, this is a component of the larger plan and a component of what the marketing team is already doing in-house. And we really do have an opportunity right now to tell these stories that Cindy had talked about. It is the role of marketing to tell the story, and right now we have a wonderful opportunity because public sentiment has shifted around transportation as well as for the PSTA brand. We are definitely doing things that are innovative and new, and so we have an opportunity to tell that story to the broader group here in Pinellas County. We do a really great job communicating to our current riders, but what about those that may not interact with PSTA on a daily basis? However, they do support it through their tax dollars and that supportive role in the community. And it's important that they're aware of what we're doing as well. So our campaign objective is around that idea of building awareness for PSTA's innovative products and services designed to support economic vitality, thriving communities, and enhance the quality of life of the local community. And you'll notice that language is a little bit familiar. It does come from your mission statement, so we want to make sure that we're really understanding the purpose of PSTA. It's also important that we understand consumer perception, and marketing doesn't happen in a vacuum. So what we know about consumers today, as I mentioned, they are more transportation agnostic. People are less concerned with the mode in which they get from A to B. They want to know that it can get them there quickly and efficient, and that's why we're seeing so much disruption in this space right now, really positive disruption, I would say. And because of this on-demand culture from our millennials and now the next generation coming in, sometimes they do struggle with the rigid bus system, and I think that's why we're seeing some of the Uber and Lyft popularity. It gives people a little more control. But we also know that there's growth happening in the greater Tampa Bay area, and we're looking at transportation on more of a regional basis, and more people are traveling across those bridges for work and play. And then, as I mentioned, although residents of Pinellas County do support public transportation through tax dollars, they may not be very aware of all the great things that we're doing. So within this campaign, we would want to tell these stories and tell the stories of the products and services, the new things that we have, and it's really always exciting when we do have new things to talk about, and there are several here with PSTA. A few of them are listed here: Direct Connect, Flamingo Fairs, and of course the BRT, which continues to get press. Great. And so now I'll pass it to Stacy to talk a little bit about how we would target the consumer.
So something I want to go back to that Cindy talked about, and we talked about in the last committee meeting, is that if you don't tell your own story, somebody really will tell it for you. So as the planning committee, you know a lot about sequencing and talking to the right audience. So all of the things that Elisa talked about from an opportunity standpoint and Cindy talked about that her team has been working on are really setting the table for the absolute right time for us to be talking about the greater PSTA message. So timing, of course, is obviously very important in sequencing, but it's also the audience that we're speaking to and how we are essentially reintroducing ourselves to the Pinellas County community and the taxpayers. So going back to telling that story, anybody who watches the news, reads the paper, goes online, there is literally an attack on government agencies and how money is being spent. So for us to get out in front and talk about all of the services and everything that we're doing for the community to build a better community and have access to different things is a story that we can tell, and we can tell proactively. And it dovetails perfectly with all the groundwork and the work that Cindy and her team has been doing really over the last year, 18 months. So that target audience, right time, right audience. At FKQ, we have a suite of tools that enable us to really focus on being as data-driven as we possibly can. So within that suite of tools, we are able to go in and provide inputs about the kind of person that we want to talk to, so then we can create a very specific profile of that audience. So what we're able to do is we can go in and say we want to talk to people obviously in Pinellas County. We don't want to waste any money. We want to be efficient and effective and not have any spill. So we really want to talk to that specific constituent. Then we know that if they own their own residence as opposed to renting, we know that they're taxpayers in the community, they're constituents, they're stakeholders, they care about how money is being spent within the county. We can also go in and we can input more information that gets even more specific about those people that own their homes and live in Pinellas County, and actually drill down to what they do for a living. And we can be as broad or as specific as we want. And then what that kind of gives us is the opportunity to talk to business leaders who have an opportunity to expand on the contributions that we as PSTA are making. Then this red X, so this might seem unusual. Why would we want to talk to people who are not riders? Well, our riders are probably the people that use us in a very utilitarian manner, get us from access point A to access point B, and they're aware of many of our products and services. But as general community members and taxpayers, they don't fully understand. They might see a PSTA bus out in the community. They might have an inkling that some of their employees utilize public transportation. But how do we communicate directly to those people that don't have as great of awareness? So that's where that piece comes in of talking to people that have not used bus transportation in the last 7 days. And that gives us the opportunity to really reach a larger community outside of just our riders. Now, rest assured, we're still going to be touching a ridership community, but in a different manner. It might be through their employer, it might be through a relative. But it gives us an opportunity to kind of have a handshake and reintroduce ourselves and remind people about that modern transit communication opportunity that we have. So with all of that, basically when we put in all of those inputs, what it gives us is a very robust profile of the kind of person that we should be talking to. So there's a little bit of a skew towards females. From an age perspective, 25 to 54, the sweet spot, kind of where we index a little bit higher, is on the higher end of that age of 45 to 54, high propensity towards being married, having children. You can see they may work at home, be a small business owner, and then some actually have a child in college. So then what we're able to do is translate all of that profile information into a broad-based media target. So that gives us a media buying target of 25 to 54. However, we don't want to be broad-based, we want to be effective, and we want to be efficient. So we take that, and then we look at our target profile specifically, and we get a really good idea of how they consume media. So obviously on the high side, we have our internet, we have our outdoor radio in the middle, television, lighter media usage on the radio side. Now, important to note that although the television usage may show up as a little lower, it is the highest reach medium that we have to be able to impact as many people as possible. So just keep that part in mind. So this is a funnel that we talk about a lot in marketing. And before we can really get anyone to be predisposed to PSTA, we have to start at the top. So you really do have to build that relationship. We talked about the handshake. So that starts with awareness, getting people's attention so that they have an understanding overall of what you do. Then you get into the interest part of the funnel where you have your message, you talk about the different attributes, and that's where you have an opportunity to actually engage. And then finally, you want the point of desire, and that's where you're having people kind of change their behavior and feel differently about your brand. You're able to be persuasive, and they can have a favorable opinion about you. So with all of that, our media flighting strategy is designed to really move through that funnel in a full complement to all of the things that are going to be done concurrently with Cindy and her team as well. So the launch is where we kick off, and that's where we use essentially our loudest voice. That's our outside voice. That's where we have the highest reach. We have the full complement of the mediums or the touch points that we'll be utilizing. You can see cable. So when you think about television, you may think, well, why would we use television? That has such a strong reach that there'll be too much spill, too much waste. we're actually able to go in and we can do zoned cable so that we can specifically reach those Pinellas County residents that we want to reach, which is an impactful way for us to really get our message across. And, which is wonderful, we were able to negotiate a one-to-one, kind of a BOGO, if you will, for our media, which is always a wonderful thing to be able to stretch those dollars even further. We would build in a plus up, so the touch points would be very similar to the launch time period, just a little bit lower level. And then our sustaining or always on gives us an opportunity to continue to talk in some different touch points as well. So here you
We have
can
a question.
Oh,
Could you
sure.
go back a slide?
Sure.
Can you define flighting?
Yes, so actually this is flighting. So if you look, you can see that during our first time period, which is January, we have our zoned cable, we have our digital, and we have our out of home. So that's essentially our first flight. Then our second flight begins in February. But we do have some always on. Here you can see so that our message has some continuity. And the always on messaging is in our digital as well as our out of home.
And this really has to do with how broadcast and or radio kind of media is scheduled. You're purchasing a tight schedule on those types of mediums versus an outdoor board you may usually buy for a month or for a longer time period. So this allows us to maximize the spend because we can't afford to be on the entire campaign, but we're able to kind of blitz and make sure that we're hitting a good number of reach and impression, but then have enough spots running so that there's also good frequency there.
Flighting is really just sequencing.
Okay,
It's just taking a time period and sequencing.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
It's also really important when we're running these types of campaigns that we have the appropriate metrics or key performance indicators. And for this one, we look back at the campaign objective, which was around awareness and favorability. So we would be partnering with a research firm to run a survey that would be deployed before the campaign to gauge where people's knowledge base is now and where their opinions are for PSTA. And then after the campaign runs and we have a chance to tell our stories and bring more awareness to them, we would run that same type of survey and see how the metrics have moved. So hopefully people that were checking maybe, no, I don't know much about that program, after the campaign now they're able to check, yes, I am aware of that program. In addition to this type of effectiveness tracking within the campaign, because there are so much digital tracking capabilities, we're going to be able to see how many people clicked on our banner, how many people have come to the website and or landing page and engaged with the campaign as well. And then when we take a look at the budget, we were given a budget of $230,000 for this entire effort, and of course the bulk of that will go into media buying. For cable, again, we looked at bus wraps and outdoor bulletins. We'll be looking at those digital banners and plussing up some of the paid social that's going on right now. And then the next area would be within creative development and production. So our team will be creating a kind of brand look and feel that will result in some good brand graphics and or iconography that then can be used by the internal team, so that ultimately within this kind of longer term plan, more of our materials start looking the same, and that helps with our frequency of message as well. And then lastly here, because we are working with an outside firm, the effectiveness tracking survey also has a budget to it.
Thank you.
So next steps, after next week, when hopefully the board approves our task work order with FKQ, we'll move into the creative development that'll happen over the summer. We'll bring it to PSTA executive staff and to the board in August. Creative production will begin in September, and we anticipate the media launch in January of 2018. And we decided to wait till January 2018 because October, November, December is kind of a noisy time. You have elections going on, you have Christmas going on, holiday shopping, so we want to kind of maximize our reach and our dollars that we have to spend. So with that, this is an action item. Our request is that you please recommend approval of a task work order with FKQ for an amount not to exceed $230,000 for an innovative awareness campaign. If approved, the dollars would be programmed into next year's fiscal 2018 budget. And we'd be happy to entertain questions.
Madam Chair? Look, I have a question with regard to the wraps. How is that paid? Are we doing this directly, or are we going through our media people that handle the wrapping sales and we're paying retail on that?
No, we would not pay for the space. We would just pay for the production of the printing of the vinyl.
Okay.
So part of our agreement with Direct Media is that we get a certain percentage of our own fleet for our own messages.
Okay, fine, great, thank you. Move approval, Madam Chair?
I have a couple of questions.
Okay.
if I- This is the third time I've heard this, and every time I hear something
Yeah, well, that's why I just
deeper
asked the
in
question.
there, and
We like to refine.
it's, so you mentioned once during there about there is an attack on government agencies for how they spend their money.
Mhm.
And I think that's, that's a very appropriate recognition. And so, kind of in framing the next step of this, it's, we're not spending tax dollars to promote our business, but we're spending it because I don't think the public sees an investment in marketing to increase the size of PSTA. But when you're using the term modern, we're not your father's bus system because we are adapting and changing to our customers' changing needs. We're not leaving our customers behind, but we have different needs and we're responding to that. And so this is not about promoting PSTA, but it's about promoting the responsiveness of our services to our changing environment. And I think that's kind of a subtle message, but I'd really rather we didn't even talk about marketing. But I don't know what the word should be.
Awareness campaign.
What?
An awareness campaign?
Yeah. So that was one thing that I think is pretty important. The other thing, you mentioned you're not doing it in the fall because of elections. Are there elections in the fall of 17?
So here.
There's some.
Penny for Pinellas.
There's some municipal,
Penny,
mostly
okay.
Penny for Pinellas.
Yeah.
We were concerned that, just didn't want to have any confusion.
Got
We
it.
don't necessarily
Good.
think people
I
connect
forgot
us,
that.
but.
Thank you.
That's important.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned the brand. And are we doing anything brand-wise? Or is that just sort of operating in the background in everything we do in promoting our brand?
Yes. Yeah, the brand is always there. It's always the PSTA brand. We're wanting to remind people, introduce the PSTA brand to people that haven't necessarily seen it before, and introduce ourselves as being innovative providers of public transit.
Okay.
But I think when
I
I don't know who said it, it was more in the broader sense of public transportation in Pinellas County. I mean, well, we're not really spending any money that I'm aware of promoting the little oval
Right,
and the
right, right.
and 4 letters,
Right. And
Pennsylvania therapists.
Pennsylvania State Troopers
State Troopers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
PSTA.
And then the other thing is kind of like the stories in the paper are really about traffic grid now, and if this thing keeps going, it could sort of run over us. If
That's
we're-
what I was
Yeah.
saying earlier.
You're talking about, you were talking about that earlier, Jim.
Yes.
that, how are we aligned with where the regional transit story is going? We've got the meeting coming up on the 12th of May.
Coming up later this meeting, Heather's gonna summarize that discussion again.
So is anything you're doing dealing with traffic gridlock, or will it be part of the message?
We haven't really talked about the creative development. I mean, the overarching kind of creative guideline is, PSTA is a modern, innovative transportation provider. How we actually tell that story, we haven't gotten to that. We haven't gotten to that creative development part yet. We're gonna have a lot to try to say in a 30-second spot, so we have to be pretty targeted and pretty specific. But there's all kinds of ways to show that. Like in the last meeting, somebody brought up clean buses. How do you show that the buses are clean? And Stacy says, well, you might not say we have clean buses, but the image that you show is a shiny, gleaming bus, and it gives you that impression. So, somewhere in the storytelling, I'm sure in the brainstorming, traffic's an issue. It's something that we'll talk about. I'm not sure how exactly it'll end up being part of the story, but it'll definitely be in the menu.
And we're gonna have, between this meeting and the last meeting, there's been a dozen awesome suggestions about things to communicate. We do have to be mindful about being clear. So the great news is that this campaign is one piece of communication. There's already existing channels of communication that Cindy's team is using, and we're gonna have the opportunity underneath this messaging to talk about some of all of those other things, and it's all going to be one great cohesive message. So not everything will make a television spot, not everything will make a banner about this size on a mobile phone, but we will have the opportunity through the umbrella of the campaign and the messaging to carry through those other verticals of messaging and be able to get all of those wonderful things out there. Because again, we are rich with messages, which is a great problem to have.
I think one of the big messages is that we're a solution to the gridlock, that we can get you out of the gridlock and let you read your email while everybody else is stuck in gridlock.
Use your real time to go out to the bus where you sit and use the Wi-Fi.
Yeah. Instead of cursing at your neighbors. I always thought we kind of missed, I hate to say the G word, but I think we missed an opportunity with green light to talk about sitting in traffic, and wouldn't you love to not have to do that?
Well, we missed the grassroots.
Well, yes, I don't want to get,
But
I
then.
don't want to get into that field
But,
of weeds.
but using the G word, grassroots, this is trying to communicate to the grassroots.
Yeah.
And as much as we can have the grassroots involved in this communication, telling the writer's story, I think is, that the changing writer and how they're finding that this is helpful, but not leaving behind the traditional writer and telling their story as well.
Okay, so we have a motion for.
I'll second that.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you
And I
very
think
much.
this is a great use of our resources. It's very inexpensive for a 2-year program.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Great presentation, ladies.
All right. Next is budget.
It's budget, which will be just as invigorating and exciting as
Michael,
marketing.
go for it, man.
Good morning. My name is Michael Hansen. I'm the Director of Finance here at PSTA. Last month, we brought to you, as we began our budget process, we brought to you an information item on our 5-year budget assumptions as well as our budget calendar. And one of those larger assumptions that goes along with that is that of personnel assumptions. So this month, Trish Collins, our Staffing and Development Manager, and I are going to bring forth an information item on our fiscal year 2018 personnel assumptions. So personnel costs, they make up the largest portion of our budget. In our fiscal year 17 budget, they made up approximately 60% of our total budget, or $42 million in our $70 million budget. Of that, salaries made up about 73% of that, and fringe benefits made up the other 27%. Our 4 largest key fringe benefit items are, the 2 largest are health insurance as well as FRS pension-related costs, followed closely by Social Security, Medicare, and workers' compensation costs.
Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about first the general overview of our workforce distribution. Of course, our transportation division remains the largest segment of our workforce. We've got about 72% of our employees who are involved in our day-to-day service. Our second largest area is the maintenance division, with 103 employees. That's about 17% of our workforce, who every day are making sure that our buses, our facilities, and our countywide amenities are in top working order. Rounding out the rest of our employees are the administrative group. That's our finance and planning, HR and IT and marketing segment. We've got 66.5 as our head count for that group.
I'm sorry, the 66.5 was what?
That is the number, the head count number for our administrative group. It makes up about 11% of our employees.
That's the number I was at.
Yes. You know, we have two labor agreements that are negotiated with SEIU union, the largest of which we're currently on year 2 of a 3-year agreement that's in place for our operators, our mechanics, very nearly all of our bargaining unit employees. So that means that our personnel costs for the vast majority of our employees are fixed at a known rate for the upcoming fiscal year. We do have a second labor agreement that's with our SEIU supervisors. That's 29 frontline supervisors in our maintenance and our transportation area. And that agreement is going to be expiring in September, so we'll be entering negotiations with that group very soon. In the supervisor's agreement that we'll be looking at, those wages are set as a percentage of the top pay for mechanics and operators. So their wages float above the wages that have already been negotiated in the other agreement. Last year, for our administrative employees, we partnered with HART on a compensation study. Prior to that, it had been about 10 years since that had been done. So that was definitely due. So going forward, we'll be keeping on top of that, looking at our market conditions and making periodic updates to make sure that our pay structure for administrative employees is competitive, that we can attract and retain the workforce that can provide our services. And I'll also note that we have a 3.5% assumption for administrative adjustments for the coming fiscal year. Our merit increases, our performance increases, will be ranging up to just 3%.
So our two largest fringe benefit line items are health insurance and our FRS pension systems cost. And they make up about $7.9 million for our fiscal year 2017 budget. Our current assumption for the increase in those that was presented in our budget assumptions last month was a 10% increase. I've looked at some of the recent legislation that's being proposed that sets our FRS rates that go into effect in July of 2017. And it looks like we're looking at about a 7% increase in our Florida retirement system pension costs. Our Cigna contract is set to expire September 30, 2017, and we've met with our broker, Gehring Group, several times over the last few months, and we're seeing a significantly higher claims costs over the last fiscal year than we've seen in previous years. So we have some concerns that we may not be able to stay within that 10% increase for that health insurance premiums. With that in mind, we're considering several options. One is maintaining our current minimum premium plan, which is a type of self-insured plan where we pay administrative fees to administer the plan. We pay actual claims costs up to a certain, and we pay for stop-loss premium that keeps those claims costs to a certain maximum amount. We're looking at potentially going self-insured, where we would assume all the risk, or other options to include working with HART to see if there's any cost savings by combining efforts with HART. We're currently working on a solicitation with Gehring. We received a draft of it last week, and we're reviewing it now. We're going out to bid for health insurance sometime in early May, and we'll bring that agenda item to the board with our recommendation in July of 2017. So in summary, personnel is PSTA's biggest cost driver. It's about 60% of our budget. We have some concerns that health insurance premium increase may be above our initial 10% assumption projection. We're getting started to start negotiations with our 29 SEIU supervisors. And our greatest number of employees in our other bargaining unit are under a successfully negotiated contract through the end of fiscal year 2018. Several new positions have been requested for our fiscal year 2018 budget. We have meetings scheduled with our CEO, our chiefs and directors in early May, where we'll discuss those position requests. And any positions we want to recommend to the board, we'll bring forth in our June draft of our first draft of our budget in June. Are there any questions?
Oh, okay. I have two questions. One is, on the supervisory SEIU contract, what constitutes supervisory level, and at what point would someone go from being in the SEIU contract and go to just being a salaried employee? What's the kind of the break point where that happens?
Yeah.
What kind of jobs are we talking about?
That's a great question, thanks. The frontline employees, driver, mechanic, service attendant, CSR, those are SEIU employees.
Right.
In maintenance and in transportation, the very next level of supervisors who are monitoring the day-to-day work. So these are maintenance supervisors who are distributing the work, who are initially checking the work that's being done, who are responding to, I need some help. That first line of assistance, those supervisors are SEIU. All of the other job descriptions that we have above that point are non-represented administrative positions. Similarly, in the transportation department, our frontline SEIU supervisors are at the dispatch window. They're on the radio room taking immediate calls from drivers. So they're handling that moment by moment service need to assist the drivers who are on the road. And again, every level above that, every job description that's created above that is a non-represented position.
Okay. All right. Great. Thank you.
Looking at the 66 people in the administrative, are any of those direct support people like the money counting group?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, they would be included as part of the finance department.
I think that would be useful to know, because we, even though they're not really admin in that they're direct labor rather than burden labor. I think of them as directly supporting. They wouldn't be able to be consolidated if we consolidated with Hart, for instance, versus. And so I think it would be useful to have a little bit more breakdown of that 66 people.
Sure.
There may be some operations supervisors that would, if we were to consolidate with Hart, there would be no way that, as long as you had a bus barn here, you would have to have that kind of administrative director. So I'd be interested in breaking down that 66 a little more.
Yeah.
Because 11% is kind of low to start with, but it probably could be even lower if you look at that.
Yeah, I'd be happy to provide you that extra.
Actually,
detail.
and I would imagine, I hope that we will again present the full budget in June and show some context to some of these various metrics with the American Bus benchmarking
Great.
stuff. And this is that percentage of admin, operations, maintenance is one of the many KPIs they track. The 11% for PSTA is substantially lower than most of the other members. But like Trish said, some of it is the benchmarking gets more detailed into the actual functions instead of being subjective. Like the revenue counters are in our case in the finance department, so they're considered admin, but and they're non-union. But in other trans systems, they're in their operations. So a better apples to apples is the benchmarking stuff, I would say.
It might be helpful to have a working org chart to kind of show
Yeah, that's a good idea.
how many are in each category and
Yeah.
how that falls out.
Part of our PSTA 101. There's gonna be a test.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that was the whole budget thing. Regional transit feasibility plan.
And welcome to Whit, who can, I'm sure, shed some light on this topic too.
Well, while she's pulling it up, today we're just going to give you a brief overview of the process that's being used to develop the regional transit feasibility plan. There's a much longer presentation that Scott Pringle will give the board next week, and he'll be able to get into the details of their technical analysis. But we really haven't brought this to you all yet, and so wanted to try to start engaging the board on this. The regional, so it's now called the Regional Transit Feasibility Plan. It's had multiple names, including study, but now it's a plan. And it is being funded by DOT and managed by HART. PSTA is participating as part of a technical review team. But the primary group that this is being brought to for discussion is the TMA leadership group. And so we do have a couple of members on the PSTA board that also attend those meetings. But we really did want to work with you all and talk with you about how can we engage our board more and the people in Pinellas County.
You may have to be able to work.
It worked the other day. It worked yesterday. All right, just click it. Just click it. Okay. So the goals of the plan are to identify a regional transit project or a set of projects that can be built, to identify how it'll be funded, and then who would build and maintain the project. Furthermore, the projects should be forward-thinking. I mean, these are kind of the obvious things. They should serve our region today, and they should also support future growth. Okay. And while the orange there shows that you could get a project done much quicker if you just use local funding, and then a little slower if you use local and state funding, and then the federal process is obviously the longest process. But we are really too early, or the planning is really too early to fully preclude the federal process. So the plan is being conducted in such a way that it can, it's in keeping with the capital investment grant program that's through the Federal Transit Administration.
Madam Chair, on that one, are you saying there's no NEPA requirement if you go use state funding?
No, it's kind of works its way up. So you still have the NEPA moving upward.
It's in the
It's within the
PA
PD&E.
project development.
PD&E includes NEPA.
And then on the top line, where's
It's in the
NEPA?
project development. So kind of like our Central Avenue BRT,
Yeah.
the NEPA is part of the project development phase. So kind of in keeping with that, leaving the option for the federal process open, the criteria that are being used to evaluate the projects or the corridors are based on the federal rating criteria. So that's shown here. It's okay. But the criteria includes things like ridership and percent of people reached within station areas, jobs. There are basically 3 steps with how they're conducting the study. The first step is to evaluate all of the connections in the region and to identify the top connections. So here it says the top 5 corridors. And then from there, narrow down to the top 3 projects, the best projects, and then taking those projects and looking into how and when those could be implemented. So kind of developing a timeline and potential funding sources. Because it is based on that federal criteria, which is heavily focused on jobs and population and travel patterns, the study started with the top activity centers based on jobs and population. So in Pinellas, that's Clearwater, Gateway, and St. Pete, and then in Hillsborough, it's West Shore, Tampa, USF area. And then from there, looking at how connections are made between all of the activity centers. And these corridors here are what they have now screened down to out of phase one. And then the idea is to look much more deeper into those corridors and identify specific projects. And then they've also included a lot of the other corridors that may make those important county level or more localized connections. So that's what's in the green here. But those are not moving forward per se in this plan. However, they wanted to make sure that they emphasize the importance of all of these projects and that nothing to do with this plan should affect whether those improvements in those corridors move forward or not. And then, okay, so the next steps are to start looking at the modes that would be used, transit modes, develop the higher level costs, and then the implementation feasibility for these potential projects. So that's really the overview, and like I said, we just really want to start getting you all engaged and maybe have you reflect on the process and the plan itself. And that's the end.
Okay. Yes.
I think you were the one board member on PSTA that was at the TMA meeting.
Yes. Which is kind of a question. I don't know if you've had a chance to talk to Darden about the official member from PSTA to the TMA.
I did talk to her about that.
Okay.
She's hoping that she'll be able to go.
She'll be going.
Yeah.
That would be the traditional approach. I have been going, and they have a name tag for me there because I've just been going. So, but I think it's more appropriate that the chair of PSTA be there. On the chart on the route map, it shows the route from Gateway to Clearwater is going along East Bay, which right now it's just the connection between those points instead of along that corridor. The reason I mention that is that corridor back during the G time got considerable questions. Well, how would you run a light rail down the middle of East Bay? So it's really not that route, it's between those 2 points.
Correct.
And then the other thing is, this is all based on our existing land development pattern instead of a land development pattern that we want to get to, which, I'm looking over toward Whit, and that we may want to strategically, for instance, move people out of lower level areas, and that would, I know that's related here, but is it normal to not go out to the public for where do you want us to have additional density and population growth, or you didn't include the public involvement schedule.
Oh, right. Well, I think my understanding is that the purpose of this plan was to look at, there's so many studies have already been conducted.
Right.
So they keep saying 55 studies have been conducted about premium transit, and that all of those studies included a lot of data and a lot of work. So, for example, the alternatives analysis in Pinellas, and when we worked really closely with the MPO in developing that future jobs and population data. And so during that time, as we were doing the long-range transportation plan, we did work with all of the cities, public, on, and we moved, quote unquote, moved some population in the station areas. I would assume that they're using the data that was not like that because the referendum didn't pass. And I'm not sure what they're using in Hillsborough, but yeah, so I mean, all these studies would have contained that. So they're trying not to go back and reinvent the wheel and study all these things that have been studied before. But I think, you're correct that, if a premium transit were, rail, for instance, were put into place, that you would want those land use policies so that you could focus the density and intensity around the station areas. And Pinellas, at the Fort Pinellas, they do have the trans-oriented development vision map, which does allow for, that to occur.
I guess if we were God and could change things, would we distribute things any differently? Maybe not.
I would
Because
hope so.
that's where the traditional development, the geology of the location is, you put concentrations near seaports, near.
We have a lot of, we had a lot of employment concentrations along the CSX line, for instance.
We're not moving the airport, for instance.
Correct.
If I could respond to that briefly, if that's
Please,
okay?
yeah.
Just to augment this, Heather's right, they're building off adopted plans, and so the countywide land use plan. But we are embarking on a Gateway Area Mid-County Master Plan, and we've about got the funding committed, and we think we will by October, to begin that effort. And that, if this holds true, we will be aligning that planning effort with the outcomes of the Regional Transit Feasibility Plan to do exactly what you're suggesting, is to develop a framework for incentivizing and encouraging higher density walkable development in proximity to these lines. Not necessarily, we don't know the stations yet, or technology, that's still yet to come, but to at least ready this area for that. And then our US 19 corridor vision is doing the same thing in the US 19 corridor. And those are the two areas. Probably the third would be the CSX corridor, where we have the greatest capacity for growth and redevelopment. And I think they're all being embraced by this and will be in alignment. We're just, they're a little ahead of us working on older data, and we're going to be coming in refreshing that data. And our long-range transportation plan now has to be adopted by 2019. So we'll be taking the outcome of this and folding it into the next update of the transportation plan.
Can we go back to the orange and the purple slide?
Go back one.
Just go to the scroll bar on the right.
Page up, page down.
There.
No, he wants to go to the funding.
There we go.
Oh, no.
My question here is that we've got a picture of employment and we've got a picture of population, and especially in St. Pete through Clearwater there, we've got a large number of people and not too much in the way of employment on the orange side. Now, maybe that's just the colors aren't the same or whatever, but we got a lot of people that are going to need transportation and need employment when you look at those two charts, and so that's of concern. The second thing is that I wanted the blue line. I like the green lines for the connections, but there's still an awful lot of concentration on roads. The blue is almost all roads, and we really need to concentrate on long-term territory, but we need to concentrate on alternate public transportation options rather than roads, because we all know what that. I mean, I was almost late this morning. It's probably a lot of you guys were, but there's always something going on. You need something that's not depending on traffic lights and so on. You need an alternate transportation method, and that's rail. That doesn't get bogged down with red lights and all that kind of thing.
And any accidents.
Yeah, exactly. So
Or
that's the key thing. I'm sorry?
Dedicated right away.
Yeah, yes. So I hope we're working on that as a part of this overall plan.
We are.
Yeah.
And one thing that DOT keeps saying is they're getting a lot of pressure in Tallahassee and from our legislative delegation and from central office saying, bring us a project. We want to fund a project in Tampa Bay, and that's what the study's about, is to find that first project to get funding.
I think I really like the point that you called out, is that some of our large employment centers do not have a lot of population. And I think that that is a really large disparity, and I think some of that is going to be attempted to be addressed through the Gateway Master Plan, but you're absolutely correct. Our largest employment center, the Gateway area, everyone has to commute there, pretty much. I mean, unless you live in Feather Sound, I guess.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Keep playing, guys.
I think it's the most interesting thing to me that the study ranked one of the criteria was number of studies. Which, when you have 55,
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds kind of ridiculous, but then when you think about it, they have 55, it's kind of a good proxy for, and the goal of not doing a 56 study is a very noble one. So I think it's pretty interesting.
Like having a non-fundraiser. Anyway.
Right.
Future meeting subjects, do we have anything?
That's pretty much it. Just, I think it's always good to note that the reason that the planning committee got that presentation from Mike and Trish on the budget is because the budget is a forward-thinking plan, a financial plan for how we're going to spend the money next year. So in May and then in June, the planning committee will be the committee that takes a look at the the budget before it goes to the PSTA board at the June meeting.
So does the finance committee also look at it? I mean,
Finance committee is, they want to look at it, but technically, the finance committee was designed to be overseeing actual, the current spending. That's why they review a lot of contracts and current activity with PSTA, and sort of how we're managing the system, looking at performance monitoring and the metrics on how we're performing, that kind of stuff, with the planning committee looking to the future.
okay. I was just wondering if we're both gonna have a presentation again, if we should do it together.
Yeah, well.
Seems like we do have a lot of repetitive, I mean, like, since I was the only one that hadn't seen the other presentation, I could have come a half an hour earlier, because we have a lot of overlap.
Yeah.
I guess.
I
The
didn't
more we can
realize
do
that.
I guess, the better, because otherwise
This-
we're putting your poor staff through multiple presentations and have the board members through multiple presentations, so.
That's okay. The two board members had more comments, but no. Lately, we've been trying to have when we have a presentation that maybe has current impacts and future, to try to have a combo at 10:15. But sometimes that just doesn't seem to.
Well, I know.
It would have worked today, probably.
Yeah.
Finance always goes over.
Yeah, because it's not, that's a good point, Madam Chair, because it takes people away from their regular jobs if they're doing presentations, does twice for the same.
Yeah.
Or just,
Yeah.
whatever. Yes.
I told Mr. Miller, but I will not be here next month. I've got a conflict. We just barely had a quorum, so we need to make sure that you can function
I know.
next month. I don't know what the other
That's,
two folks.
Larissa's gonna strong arm everybody.
Or at least to say whether they're showing up or not, because,
Yeah.
yeah.
I guess it was
I think
Mr.
we'll-
Long.
I mean, we did pretty good today, because we knew two of them weren't gonna be here. Well,
We knew
know
one
about
person wasn't going to be here. Garden
Pretty
rights.
strong arm, at least one person, to say whether she's gonna be
Yeah.
here. Yeah.
And Darden said she'll be at the planning committee next month, or she's planning on being.
I mean, I'd be glad to repeat my whining at the last meeting about people showing up, or at least saying they're not gonna show up to committee.
Yeah.
It's
So
just,
I'm a little worried about.
I mean, let's be respectful of other people's time.
It almost seems like this is a change in our process, because before we had almost everybody showed up to every committee meeting.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether people don't think it's important to show, or it's just
I don't
a strange time.
I think it's folks not tracking their calendar, or, I don't know, because
Well,
I'm
last
supposed to have my
month,
one-on-one
they
with
had approved,
Mr. Johnson in
the
20 minutes.
two new appointments to planning.
Right,
So
Right.
that's why it was kind of a
Mhm.
difficult month.
but we had 2 meetings with, well, I guess we had 4 people at the last finance committee.
Okay.
I'll bring it up again.
That'd be good. Okay.
Right, yes, we're good then.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I'm supposed to have my one-on-one.
What?
We're still gonna have to make it.
You're over to finish up.
We're still gonna have to.
Okay, so you have.
Don't leave it.